Walk through any airport terminal in the world, board any commercial aircraft operated by any airline, and the jet bridge will connect to the left side of the fuselage. The door you walk through is on the left. The cabin crew greeting you at the threshold is standing on the left. The aircraft has doors on the right side as well. Identical in design, equally functional, certified to the same standards. On a typical narrow-body aircraft, those right side doors will remain closed throughout the entire turnaround. On the widest long-haul aircraft, they open occasionally for specific operational purposes, but never for passenger boarding as a standard procedure. This arrangement holds at every commercial airport on every continent. It has held for as long as commercial aviation has existed. And its origin has nothing to do with aircraft design. The principle that governs which side of a vessel faces the dock, the terminal, or the loading area predates powered flight by centuries. In the earliest period of seafaring, before mechanical steering systems existed, ships were steered by a large oar mounted on the right side of the hull near the stern. This steering oar, the source of the word starboard, derived from the Old English starboard, meaning steering side, was a fixed attachment that made it impractical to bring the right side of the vessel against a dock or quay. Contact between the dock and the steering oar could damage it, and damage to the steering oar could leave the vessel uncontrollable. Ships therefore approached docks and loading facilities from the left side, keeping the steering oar on the open water side away from the dock. The left side of a vessel, the side that faced the dock or port, became known as the larboard, later simplified to port, a direct reference to the harbors it faced during loading and unloading operations. The association between the left side of a vessel and the loading, unloading, and passenger embarkation functions became so deeply embedded in maritime practice that it survived the development of mechanical rudders that made the original steering oar logic obsolete. By the time rudders mounted on the center line of the hull replaced side-mounted steering oars, the operational convention of using the port side for dock operations was already institutionalized across the entire maritime industry. Docks were built to accommodate left-side approach. Loading equipment was configured for left-side access. Port procedures assumed left-side contact. The infrastructure and the convention reinforced each other until neither could be easily changed. Commercial aviation developed in the early 20th century at a time when maritime transport was still the dominant form of long-distance passenger travel. The people who designed the first passenger aircraft, the airports that received them, and the operational procedures that governed their use were working in a world where the portside convention was a universal and unquestioned feature of how passenger vehicles were handled. The transfer of that convention to aviation was not a deliberate decision made at a specific moment by identifiable individuals. It was an absorption, the new industry adopting the established norms of the transportation culture it was emerging from, because those norms were already understood by everyone involved. The early passenger aircraft of the 1920s and 1930s used boarding stairs and ramps rather than jet bridges, which would not appear until the 1960s. But even in the era of ground-level boarding, the convention of approaching and boarding from the left side was established. Ground crews positioned their equipment on the left. Passengers walked to the left door. The operational layout of the primitive airport facilities of that era was oriented around left-side aircraft access. When the industry scaled up after the Second World War and airports became more complex, the existing convention was simply built into the new infrastructure at larger scale. Jet bridges, when they were developed, were designed to connect to the left side because that was where the door was, and the door was on the left because that was where the ground crew had always positioned. The consequence of this convention becoming embedded in airport infrastructure is that it now cannot be changed without rebuilding every airport simultaneously, which is not a realistic proposition. A single airport that decided to reconfigure for right-side boarding would be incompatible with every aircraft designed for the global fleet and every operational procedure used by every airline flying to it. The convention is self-reinforcing at a scale that makes it essentially permanent. The separation of the aircraft into a left passenger side and a right service side is not merely a historical artifact preserved by infrastructure inertia. It serves a specific operational function that makes the aircraft turnaround more efficient. While passengers are boarding or disembarking through the left forward and left aft doors, the right side of the aircraft is simultaneously accessible to ground service crews for fueling, catering, water servicing, and lavatory servicing. These operations involve large vehicles, fuel trucks or hydrant carts, catering high loaders, water service vehicles, lavatory trucks that need direct access to specific service points on the fuselage. Positioning all of these vehicles on the right side while passenger movement happens on the left eliminates the conflict between pedestrian and vehicle traffic that would occur if both functions were competing for the same side of the aircraft. On a standard narrow-body aircraft turnaround, the right side of the aircraft may have 3 or 4 different service vehicles working simultaneously during the same window in which passengers are boarding on the left. The fueling agent is connecting to the underwing refueling point. The catering truck is elevated to the right forward galley door. The water service vehicle is at the water service panel. The lavatory truck is at the waste service port. None of these operations interfere with the boarding flow because they are physically separated from it by the aircraft itself. Remove the left-right separation convention, and this simultaneous operation becomes much more complicated to manage safely. The flight deck crew position convention is also connected to the left side boarding standard, though the relationship runs in the opposite causal direction from what most passengers assume. It is commonly believed that the captain sits on the left side of the cockpit because the aircraft boards from the left, giving the captain visibility over the boarding door from the flight deck window. The actual sequence was different. The captain's position on the left side of the cockpit was established in early aviation by convention adopted from maritime practice, where the commanding officer of a vessel traditionally stationed themselves on the starboard, right side of the bridge for navigational purposes, with the port side used for mooring operations. As aviation adapted maritime conventions, the captain's position migrated to the left side of the cockpit, placing the commanding pilot closer to the port side boarding door. The cockpit convention and the boarding convention reinforced each other without either one being the original cause of the other. The practical effect of the captain's left seat position on boarding operations is visible during the final stages of passenger loading. The captain conducting the exterior walk-around inspection circuits the aircraft in a specific direction that positions them on the left side of the aircraft, near the forward door as boarding is completing, giving direct visual access to the door area without requiring communication with the ground crew. When the boarding door is about to close, the captain can observe the jetbridge retraction from the left cockpit window. This operational convenience is real, but it is a consequence of 2 independent conventions aligning, rather than the product of deliberate design. Military and cargo aircraft operate with different boarding and loading conventions because their operational requirements are different. A military transport aircraft loading vehicles, equipment, and troops through a rear ramp has no particular reason to adopt passenger boarding conventions. And many military aircraft are designed for loading from either side or from the rear, depending on the tactical situation. Cargo aircraft with nose loading or side loading configurations similarly follow the geometry of their payload rather than a passenger boarding convention. The left side convention is specific to passenger operations because it originated in passenger maritime transport and was transferred to passenger aviation. The uniformity of the left side boarding convention across the entire global commercial aviation system is one of the less noticed examples of how deeply maritime tradition shaped the industry. Aviation is often presented as a break from previous transportation paradigms, faster, higher, more technically sophisticated than anything that came before. In operational terms, many of its foundational conventions were not invented but inherited. The side of the aircraft you board from, the terminology used for flight deck positions, the ceremonial traditions that mark significant flights, these all trace back to a maritime culture that preceded aviation by centuries and shaped it at the moment of its formation. The question of whether the left side boarding convention could ever change is occasionally raised in aviation planning discussions, typically in the context of double-deck aircraft or very large terminals where passenger flow management becomes more complex. The theoretical argument for right-side boarding at some gates, allowing simultaneous boarding from both sides to reduce turnaround time, encounters the same infrastructure incompatibility problem that makes any deviation from the standard impractical. Every jet bridge, at every gate, at every airport, is built to reach the left forward door of the aircraft. Rebuilding gate infrastructure to enable right-side boarding would require a coordinated investment across thousands of airports that no individual airline or airport operator has the incentive to initiate unilaterally. Some airports with remote parking positions, where aircraft park away from the terminal and passengers are bused to the aircraft, do occasionally board from both sides simultaneously when operational conditions permit. Without a fixed jet bridge determining which door is used, ground crew can position boarding stairs on whichever side the aircraft geometry and parking orientation makes most accessible. In these cases, the left side convention yields to operational pragmatism, but these are exceptions that operate outside the fixed infrastructure environment of a terminal gate, and they do not represent any movement toward changing the standard. The convention will persist for as long as commercial aviation operates with the current airport infrastructure model. That infrastructure has a replacement cycle measured in decades, and there is no commercial or safety rationale that would justify accelerating the replacement of functional jet bridges to accommodate a change in boarding side. The left door will remain the passenger door, the right side will remain the service side, and the medieval mariner who found it inconvenient to dock on the starboard side will continue, without knowing it, to shape the daily experience of several million air travelers. The left door of the aircraft you board next week is on the left because a steering oar mounted on the right side of a wooden ship made right-side docking impractical, sometime in the early medieval period. The chain of consequence connecting those two facts runs through 1,500 years of maritime practice, the formation of the commercial aviation industry, the standardization of airport infrastructure across every country that built a commercial airport, and the design of every jet bridge ever manufactured. None of it was planned as a system. All of it was inherited, one convention at a time, from the people who came before.